Welcome back to the Transform Your Mind to Transform Your Life radio podcast and television show. I'm your host, Life Coach Myrna Young, and sitting in the guest chair today is Beth Thorp, author of A New Creation, Finding Meaning in the Midst of Tragedy. And Beth and I today are going to be talking on the topic, Finding Faith After the Loss of a Child. So, it's going to be a very sobering conversation because, losing a loved one, especially a child, is a very painful experience. So I appreciate that Beth has used this opportunity to help others going through the same, tragedy or experience. So welcome, Beth.
Thank you, Myrna, for having me. So excited to be here.
You're very welcome. So excited to share your information with my listening audience. All right, well, let me give you guys a brief introduction. Beth Thorp is the executive director and co-founder of the Mitchell Thorp Foundation, whose mission is to support families whose children suffer from life-threatening illnesses, diseases, and disorders. Her new book, A New Creation: Finding Meaning in the Midst of a Tragedy, has inspired so many people in how to overcome adversity and discover purpose in their challenges. A New Creation was written 12 years after Beth's oldest son, Mitchell, came down with an undiagnosed mysterious illness that took Beth, her husband, and Mitchell across the nation looking for answers. After 5 years and still no understanding of the cause, Mitchell passed away. The Thorpes were faced with many trials that tested their faith, but they ultimately found joy and purpose by bringing the light of hope for other children and families fighting for their tomorrows. Yeah, Beth, you have my deepest sympathy, my deepest regard. I know we were smiling and laughing, but I'm sure that the pain never really goes away after losing a child. So, can you share, if you can, Mitchell's story with our listeners and why you say that God never wastes a tragedy? What a
Yes,
quote.
yes. Well, in moments of tragedy, it's easy to question, right? Why suffering is allowed to happen. Pain can feel senseless and very overwhelming and unjust at sometimes. But in my case with my son, my beautiful firstborn child, it was that in the introduction. He came down at the age of 13 with this crazy well, first we thought it was, the flu, right? Like anything, you think something's wrong, he's not feeling well, you take him to the doctor, you go through the natural steps of one thing after another and checking things off, and he wasn't getting better. In fact, he was getting worse. And so until one day he came home from school and he kind of collapsed in the front yard, and I ran out to get him, and we immediately took him to the emergency room and they ran many tests. And this went on and on for 5 years in and out of different hospitals, not only here in my region, but across the nation, looking for doctors to figure out what was causing the root cause of my son's condition. He wasn't born with this. He was a healthy young boy, 4.0 student, tremendous athlete. He loved baseball. He played baseball. He's on the cover of the book. And, he'd much rather be out there playing baseball with his friends, right? And not be in excruciating pain, which people would say, what were his symptoms? And he would often have head pain and holding his head, and we were constantly driving, trying to find what was causing all this. So we went down a very long road. And if many people have ever experienced this kind of situation before, I truly understand what they mean by practicing medicine now, because when you have a really tough case, when tests are done by doctors and they come back negative normal, but then you're looking at your child and he's presenting himself as, okay, this is not normal. And we have got to figure out what the root cause is. So I was always going after and driving what the root cause was, which ultimately we never really got an answer to that. So go figure, right? So that is something I have to live with, and my husband as well. People will often say, how do you live with not knowing? And I just had to, we did our best because we're not the doctors. We rely on the professionals to figure it out, right? And when it got to the point when he ended up passing, it was devastating. I was completely broken. The pain was so overwhelming. that I didn't know how to move on or go on. And in my deepest pain and grief, as any mother or parent would be, curled up in a ball. And God just came through that time for me like a warm blanket. And he just spoke to my spirit deep down. And he said to me in my spirit that rose up to me, my brain, and just said to me, this is not the end. This is the beginning. And I sat up in my, right, I'm grieving and I'm weeping and I'm crying. And then this message came deep in my spirit. And I looked to the heavenlies and I was like, what does that mean? This feels like the end. What does that mean? I had no clue, right? Because I'm still dealing in the deepest pains of grief. But God is so gracious. And I felt his loving presence during that time, just wrapping his arms around me and my husband, just taking us one step at a time, one day at a time, moving forward until each day he began to reveal his plan. And I'll get to that about when you say, why do I say God never wastes a tragedy? Because in those profound truths of that, in those darkest times, he can bring about the healing, the growth, and the transformation that not only impacts individuals, but can really benefit mankind down the road, which is ultimately what happened. And oftentimes God does use that, turning our tragedies into our testimonies now, right? And how God so many times, and we all know this as people, we see tragedies in humanity with disasters like the hurricanes, and communities come out in extraordinary ways on how it brings out the best in humanity. And that, to me, that is like God's redemptive handiwork right there, showing us humans how even in the worst moments, love and compassion can prevail. And so that's kind of what I mean, how God can take a tragedy and turn it around for good. And in my case, because I'm so rooted in my faith, and there was a part of me that kind of, after I went through 2 years of um, healing, I should say, it took me 2 years really to come out of it. And I seriously had to reach out to spiritual counselors, and I would recommend that, whether it's that or a counselor, wherever you feel someone who could help you move through the grief and the pain is very helpful. And don't be afraid to do so when you reach out, when you feel like you're not moving forward. Because if you can't move forward, they call that complicated grief, and it can get really serious. You're not getting out of it, and you need to move out of it. So, anyway, it took me 2 years to basically see the light of day and come out of it a little bit better, and to help others, and to see now what that calling was. We were basically chosen. My husband, actually, that message I received in my pain and grief, that same week, he was in the local church. My husband was working, and he was in a meeting, and there were people that came up to him and says, there's two boys that you coached in baseball that have cancer. One has Hodgkin's lymphoma and non-Hodgkin's, and the families are struggling to make ends meet, right? And then it was like that moment he came home to me and said, Beth, I had this strong calling that I think we need to do something to help other families going through what we went through, and we should start a foundation. And I'm like, what? We don't know anything about starting a foundation, right? What does that mean? And then I had to sit back and go, okay, is this what he meant by that? That this is not the end, this is the beginning. So I had to roll with that conviction, even when my husband heard it in a different, maybe, way, and through others, it said, you really need to help others. So that is how it started. We formed the foundation then in 2009. We filed the paperwork, and we started with those two boys. And now we are here 15 years later, helping 1,500 plus families throughout the nation and counting, giving back 5.3 million and counting,
Wow.
helping families with children going through their, like I said, own harrowing journeys. And we can talk about that later, of like exactly what the foundation does. But that is my testimony about how God can turn our pain into purpose, and allowing our struggles to be our testimonies, to share. And just like I'm sharing our story with your listeners, and how we navigated through it. And everyone has their own way of getting through it. But if for my family, if we weren't rooted in that strong foundation of faith, I probably wouldn't be here on the planet anymore. I'd
Mhm.
probably still be stuck in that.
Yeah, yeah.
And there's been
It-
many people that, yeah, you're right, that tell me, Beth, you need to speak to the people that are still stuck. Their
mhm.
mothers or fathers, or they end in divorce and separation. How many times people end in divorce and separation after a loss of a child? So common. I mean, you hear that a lot. And that's where I find, we'll get into a little bit further, but that's God's grace. His
Okay.
grace can really do that. He can transform that pain into purpose and our tragedy into our testimony. So that's why I'm here with you today.
Wow. That's amazing. That's an amazing story. And I recognize that from the time you came on, because I've had a lot of conversations on grief. I've had a lot of conversations on death of a child, death of a spouse. And the whole consensus, sure, everybody that I've spoken to have turned their, we can use this, if you want to call it a bumper sticker, God doesn't wait, it's a tragedy, because the reason they're on the show is because they wrote a book, they're coaching other people, women through it, and they were using their time of grief to transform their lives. Because service helps you to, once you help other people, it helps you to heal. I learned that from a psychiatrist a long time ago, that service is one of the most important things to allow you to heal. But
Exactly.
what I'm so the fact that you came on the show and I can see that you're on the other side because I can pick it up. I mean, you are not no longer in that grief zone, right? But and you mentioned that it took you 2 years and more. I mean, obviously longer. This is 12 years later for you to move through the process. But
Mhm.
but share with our listeners who doesn't understand, because I'm a woman of faith too, and I don't think that if my child dies that I would be angry with God and I would blame God, because we all know that tomorrow is not promised. That is how I live my life. Tomorrow is not promised. Not everybody gets to live to 100 or 90, right?
Right,
Babies die, right?
right.
But a lot of people, once they're experiencing this grief, even when they're a faith-based person, is angry at God and stop going to church and or whatever. So why do you think that your faith prevented you from ever being angry with God?
Well, for your listeners, I was angry. Yeah.
Okay.
To be truthful, yes, you are angry. You are feeling all these emotions, and
Okay.
that's part of the grief process. And you need to acknowledge every single emotion you're going through, from the fear to the anxiety to the anger to all of it. Right. And so, um, I had to move through each and one of those situations. And because I had that question also coming out of it, why? Why God? Why my family? Why my son?
Right.
We prayed over him. We laid hands on him. We did everything. Why was he not saved miraculously? All those questions. So for your audiences, know that, yeah, that is perfectly normal, and I had to deal with that and reckon with that. And, at the end of the day, I might never know why. It's not God to tell me the why. He's telling me how to move through it, how
Right.
to come through the other side of it, how to make this tragedy into a purpose. And maybe Mitchell, we don't know the mysteries of God, of what he does and how he can move. And yes, it was horrible. And for me, that anger reached up and threw out of my spirit. And when I went through all my healing, and when things that I would say had to be broken off, which you need to take out of your spirit because it can manifest inside of you if you don't release it, and can cause a lot of other health issues if
Yeah.
we don't release these things. and be healed. And learning one thing to start the healing process is learning to forgive. And I had to
Mhm.
go through a whole exercise, my husband and I, in our counseling session for your listeners, on how to forgive all the doctors that couldn't find the answers, how to forgive people who said things that they shouldn't have said, how to forgive. I mean, the list went on and on and on, right? That you are bombarded with over 5 years. And it just
Mhm.
gets pent up. So we had to go through a whole forgiveness thing, get all that off, and then move forward into begin to heal. Because when you are stuck and not and still an unforgiving spirit,
Yeah.
you will become bitter, you will become angry, and you can't move forward.
It's true. It's true. It's true. Yeah, people say they're angry at God, they stop going to church, they stop. Yeah, so I'm glad that you're sharing that that is how you felt in the beginning, but you were smart enough to go get help and
Yes.
go through the process of counseling, grief counseling, and so did you have to forgive God? Was he one of the people that you had to forgive?
I had to forgive other people. Yeah, I even had to forgive that. I had to forgive and say, I'm sorry if I doubted you. I know you must have a bigger plan than
Right.
I even can think. And that's the beauty of our story, because it really he did have a bigger plan, because he knew he
Right.
had a plan and
Right.
purpose for Mitchell,
Right.
and he knew how to take that tragedy and the pain that we went through so deeply, and he guided us through on what we needed to do to help others. So now our previous lives that my husband and I used to do, I used to be in the fashion industry. I was a stylist. My husband was in sales and marketing for a big fitness company. And so when we went through all that, and then we came out one morning, and after we came out of that healing session, I woke up and I looked my husband straight in the eye. I said, you know what? Nothing matters anymore. I don't want to do anything else on this earth unless it has eternal significance.
Oh,
He goes,
wow,
he goes,
wow.
I've
I'm
never
getting
feel.
chill bumps here from that. That is so beautiful. Wow, wow.
Yeah, and I just nothing mattered anymore, Myrna. And I was like, when you can go through the worst of the worst and
Hmm.
you lose everything, and we were about to lose everything, really, our house and everything, because one parent has to quit their job, or I had to stay by that child to advocate for them. That's where the foundation comes in. We'll explain that later. But those bills keep coming in, and we almost lost it everything. Our husband,
Wow.
my son, we almost lost our home. The medical expenses were out of the roof, even with good insurance, mind you. So, yeah.
Mhm.
So it's definitely a redemptive story, and God wanted to
Yeah,
use it
it's
for this very reason. And just to see, I have to pinch myself to this day to see all these children that we've helped and these families. And that's now for your listeners, for us, it's what we call our mission work now. This is
well, of course,
save
it's
up
definitely a mission
save up
work.
our yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. It's amazing that yes, your child had to die for, yeah, it's like Jesus, being crucified for our sins. It's the same kind of
Yeah.
thing. So that is beautiful. So that is a good transition to the question I have here is how does the Mitchell Thorpe Foundation help other families deal with kids that have life-threatening illnesses? So if we were to look at your story
Mhm.
and dissect it, you had a couple of things going on. You had your son that was sick. Well, actually, three things. You had your son that was sick, like parents. I support this in Jude Hospital for cancer
Mhm.
kids. And the families know the kids have cancer. But then you're talking about the fact that nobody knew what the problem was. So that's an added kind of stress. And then you
Mhm.
said, yes. I mean, when you're traveling across the nation, you can't work. You've got to be by your kid. So bills and finances and all that. So does your company help with how did how does your company help? Did you have counseling? Did you have help with bills? What do you guys do?
Yes, when we first started, exactly that. We started with first two boys, and now it's grown so much over the years. We had created our programs, which is our medical and home assistance was our very first program, because we knew that was the largest one that people needed help with. People would apply to the foundation. There's an application on the website to fill out. and they would submit it. And at this point, we have a big board of directors that we meet, take all our cases in front of them and say, this family needs this. We customize it for every family, so different, right? So we'll help cover anything that's not covered typically under insurance, and that's under the medical component. The home assistance for many families, it's just helping them get by with, maybe they need assistance with rent that month because mom or one of them has to stop working and they're in the hospital. Be food, it could be gas, utility bills, things of that. It could be home improvements in the house. We're working right now on three cases where some of the bathrooms need to be ADA compliant. This child's in a wheelchair, things like that, home assistance. We
Mhm.
grew then as the years went by into our second program, our healing and rehabilitation program. And that's where a lot of the families, when they leave the hospitals, they want to continue with therapy. They'll also get counseling for the family, especially marriage counseling or the whole family unit. It usually has to deal with trauma and helping that family come and how to navigate that. So we're excited as a foundation after 15 years, 100% of our families stay together, not in a divorce or separation, because we want to really make sure that family unit is preserved, because I know that from my husband and I, you can't fight this battle alone. And if you think you can, it's very difficult. You have to be stronger together. And those are some things I can talk about, some best practices that we coach some of our families on how to
Yeah, I know
survive your
that was
marriage.
one of the questions, but I just wanted to
Yeah.
know what was the component. So you do the counseling, you do the financial help, you help with, yeah, you help with with the
Oh,
home and renovations and things like that. And
yes.
is this is for kids that are sick, even if they
Yes.
live, or if they pass away? You have both?
This is usually when parents are in treatment and one of them is, needing to not work. Usually it's not after they pass. However, we have helped families with some issues with that. That was our second program. Our third, I wasn't even done, our wheelchair conversion van program, helping families get the conversion part of their van. We have a Triumph Together, which is a really fun thing program that happened under us, where we connect, we usually ask in the applications their favorite sport. We'll connect pro athletes, collegiate athletes
Mm.
with children in the hospitals and get
Mhm.
them signed merchandise, tickets to games, a fun experience outside the hospital. Yeah. And then we have our Youth Leadership Council. I mean, the programs keep growing. That is hopefully my last program. And that is students from 9th through 12th grade. We train them up in servant leadership development, and it's a 2-year commitment. They learn how to see how a nonprofit works, and they're like our hands and feet in the community. So it's a beautiful thing to see that evolve. And it came about because kids kept wanting to come out to our events. We'd hold a big 5K run walk for the community, and they want to help. And kids just like, they're really, this generation, there's
Mhm.
hope. Our next generation, they have a heart, teaching them
Mhm.
empathy and love and compassion for others. Yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, the question was if you help if their kids pass away, do you
Mhm.
still continue to help them? Or is only if their
It's
kids are living?
in treatment, yes, in treatment. After they pass, if there's any ongoing bills that needed to be paid, that we can
Okay.
help them with that. But yeah,
Oh,
it's until they
but
pass.
usually it's the you're going for the in treatment ones. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, yeah, that sounds like you've got a whole bunch of things mixed up in there. The Make a Witch Foundation, where
Yeah.
listen, yeah, that's amazing. You know, vans, transportation. That is wow. This is definitely a tragedy that God did not waste. That is absolutely amazing. Now you just mentioned something a minute ago about marriages, and I don't remember where I have a input on this, but I don't think it's anybody that I interviewed. It may be a book that I read or something. But yeah, the marriage fell apart after because the spouse was blaming the other for something they didn't do or something like that. So you say that you have some strategies or best practices to
Right.
safeguard your marriage when dealing with a crisis. Do you want to
Yeah.
talk about that now?
Sure. I usually give these. best practices to our families up front, and then if they still need help, they'll move on into our counseling program. But the first thing I tell them when we're meeting with them is, one, first practice is you got to unite as a team, and you got to recognize that you and your partner are on the same team facing the same challenges. So you got to work together, gather the information for your child's condition or treatment options, and make those decisions on united front. And I usually look at them both in the eye when I'm talking to them. And because I had to learn it the hard way too with my husband, we have to avoid the blame and the blame game and resentment on each other. Instead, focus on the supporting one another through the difficult time. And once we got through that aha moment, we knew we were stronger together instead of arguing with each other. So unite as a team is the first one. The second principle I usually tell people, you have to have that open and compassionate communication with each other, which means, yes, share your feelings, your fears, your concerns with each other without judgment, and
Mhm.
support each other with compassion, listening to your husband or listening to your wife. So that active listening to each other's perspectives really validates each other's experiences, because sometimes people go, well, you don't know how I feel. You're not listening to me. And that
Yeah.
goes on. So you really have to come together on that. So I usually put that in front of them. And then the third principle, seek support together if you need support. And there's professionals out there, or it's family members can help you, your friends, support groups, or whatever. Seek support together. Sharing your burden of caregiving, that was huge for us because I was the main caregiver, and mostly, and my husband and I took the brunt of it. But then my husband, you have to find those respite times, because it's when you're at your weakest and you're tired, and you're, for any caregiver, right, you is when you're challenged, and that's when you can erupt and say things that you might regret. So you really have to strengthen that bond,
Yeah.
and then you feel less alone basically when you're facing those challenges, when you have each other to share and that support together. So that's the third. And the fourth one I'd say, oh yeah, prioritize your self-care. Yes, that goes in hand of having a little bit of respite. I mean, what I would have done back then, and I always said, I just need an hour to take a walk, just to be by
Mhm.
myself. I just need time to just take a breath, or just to stretch and to exercise, just so I can have a clarity of mind. So self-care is so important. And then the last one I usually tell people is, find moments of joy and connection. So it means, what I mean by that is, cherish the time that you spend together with your child, and you have to celebrate those small victories along the way. So usually it's so overwhelming when a family goes in and their child's got a major diagnosis. It's like the huge elephant, and they're going through all this treatment, and you have to really look for those small victories and know that, I usually tell families, that child needs you to be strong for them. They feel your fear. They
Yeah.
feel your sadness. They feel everything. I had to do all that outside the house. I'd cry and whatever in my car. I'd come back in and be this warrior mom for my son to keep fighting. So
Mhm.
they need to feel that you are strong for them so they can keep fighting. So there's many times I'll go into the hospitals with my husband, and we will be in the hospital room, and I will actually look in that child's eye and say, this is just a small chapter in your life. And I had children just speak to me, why is this happening to me? And one young lady says, I want to go to college. And I says, look me in the eye and say, I will go to college. I
Yeah.
am going to beat this. I am going to overcome this. So we have to speak life into them and speak affirmations of life. And I usually we leave them with a book of affirmations or scriptures, things that they need to start programming their brain,
Mhm.
because the brain can take in the mind over your body and speak to your
Mhm.
body that I'm going to heal. I will overcome this. I will make it through. This isn't my death sentence. And so that's my job, is to coach and speak life into them. And sometimes the parents are like, who is this woman? But anyway, it's my way to say, no, this is not the end. Keep going, keep fighting. And even in the darkest of times, even though I don't know the outcome, but it's my job move that way into their lives and to give them some hope.
Yeah.
So those are my 5 tips on that. Find those little moments of joy and connection and celebrate those small victories along the journey, because cancer treatment alone, I mean, that's 18 months. It's a long journey. And then hopefully they're in remission and you can kind of move out of it and start feel like, oh, I have normalcy now. So yeah.
Wow. So did you guys ever think that your son was going to pass? Was it a terminal diagnosis, or because they didn't know, you always had hope?
I always had hope. I had to not think at all that he would pass. I was
Wow.
always clinging to the hope that someone would find what was wrong with
What's
him.
wrong? Right.
Yeah, and we
Right.
would get him through the other side. And yeah, so that in itself, and
Right.
that's why over the years when the foundation grew, and you're right, there are ways to find joy again, even in the midst of such heartache and pain for those that are listening. And usually I would say to them, you don't have to run out and run a foundation, because now it's like a business. It's huge when they start
Yeah,
growing.
obviously
You
not. That's just you. That's your calling.
that's
Right.
yeah, you can honor your child's memory in many different ways.
Yeah.
You
A
can
lot of people
find,
do.
yeah, find
A
meaning in
lot of
that
people
purpose and
become
things.
advocates for whatever, yeah, a lot of people do. A lot of people
Yeah.
feel that that is one way to move past the pain. Not as
Mhm.
big as what you guys are doing, but some people speak, some people, like if you're in a church, talk about it, go to groups, find little, groups or whatever that they can help others. Yeah, like, write a book, name something after their child so the memory goes on. Like you did, you named your
Yeah,
foundation the Mitchell Thorp Foundation, so his name is always there. But I have a
right.
question. Women are usually the emotional caregivers. There's a lot of men that are not emotionally available and will go into a cave in situations like that. What advice do you have for anyone that's listening that you're talking about this unity thing, but it's not happening in their marriage?
Yes, very good point. At that specific time, especially in our case, we can see that in our families, and some of them will reach out to us through a phone call. We will move them into more intensive counseling, that marriage counseling, which is over and above my uh, training, which can get into where men need to, and you're right, men have a hard time expressing emotion and they
Mhm.
want to keep it all down here. They have to feel like they have it all together and whatnot. So it does require several steps with counseling, and it has to do with everything. It usually ends up with trauma, PTSD, everything in a
Yeah.
trauma related environment, because everything is shaken up and nothing feels normal in a sense. Everything's on high intensity. So it's being patient. Yeah, it's hard. Trust me, it's hard. And then when the anger and the rage is forming, it's because of fear, because
Mhm.
you're both frightened and fearful for your child. You're
Yeah.
fearful for everything that's coming down the road, you're fearful for the finances aren't there. It's all of that. And
Mhm.
what I had to learn, is from that fear, I had to learn to go back into my faith and trust.
Mm.
Trust in my faith.
Trust in God.
Yeah,
Yes.
trust in God
Yes.
that it's going to
He
work.
will
I'm
find
just
a
sure not.
way, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
you have to have that firm foundation.
Yeah.
I don't know any other way, at least from myself. I had to go back and into the Bible and read scriptures and know what his word meant. And the moment I surrendered, right? It's a surrendering thing, because we feel
Mhm.
like we have to control. And God was telling me, I was waiting for you to let go.
So yeah, let
Yeah,
go and
I had
let
to let
God.
it go. And
Yes.
once I let go was the hardest thing to do, because as mamas, we were supposed to make things fit better, right? And I had to let go because I couldn't make it better. And I finally had to, literally on my hands and knees lay it down. And I was a bawling mess, but I had to lay it down I had to keep surrendering it and let him show me the way. And then once I did that, it's unbelievable. People came coming our way. Neighbors would knock on the door and says, "Oh, we know what you're going through and the community wants to help. They heard your story. We want to do a walkathon for you and help you raise money to help you pay off that $100,000 medical bill." And you're like, "What?
Wow.
You want to do what?" I mean, this is what happens. And they did our very first walkathon for us, and Mitchell was still living with us. 600 plus people showed up, people we didn't even know.
Of course not. Yeah.
And they ended up
You don't
raising
know
70.
600 people.
I know people it ended up raising $70,000 to help us pay off this huge medical bill we had, even with good insurance. I mean, that's
Mhm.
only the hand of God working on that. So it's
Boy,
just like it's.
let go,
I
right?
think for those is learning to release it and surrender it,
Mhm.
and pray that He has a bigger plan and something else is going to turn around. And He's been that way from the moment the foundation started, because He
Mhm.
planted that in our spirit. And so
Mhm.
my husband and I walk on that faith, knowing, okay, you planted this in our spirits. You chose us to walk this walk for a reason. We're going to follow you because this is new to us. And
Mhm.
it's unbelievable, Myrna. I mean, every time you turn around, I always say, Father, the children we're supposed to help. I don't.
Right.
They go through the hospitals.
Thank
People
you.
might say, how do they
That's
find us? Usually the social workers in the hospitals know the families that are kind of have nothing left. They're driving to the hospitals on fumes, they have nothing left. And they'll refer to families to foundations. I like they were last resort, right?
I
To
can just imagine. I can put myself in those shoes right now and know how tough and hard it is. Not only you're scared for your kid, but you have no money. You have no, a lot of times, you're right. You keep saying good insurance, but a lot of times you don't have good insurance, and insurance
yeah.
is not wanting to cover, not wanting to cover. I have my husband was going through this really, he just crashed. Everything was going wrong. And the insurance is saying, I'm not covering a scan. And I says, well, a scan is the only way that he's going to know what's going on with him. I had to pay the money cash for the scan. But they do crap like that. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
They say, well, I'm not covering a CT scan. Well, how are you going to know what's going on with him? But
Yeah.
yes, and you would think that that's good insurance, but a lot of times the insurance don't want to pay. So you keep saying good insurance, but even when you have good insurance, it's crappy. My sister, I don't
Yeah.
know how good insurance she had, but she had cancer and the insurance refused to pay for it. We're
Yeah.
Canadians, so she had to go to Canada to get treatment, else she would have died. So
Oh.
yes, it's just so I can just imagine all the
Mm-hmm.
things that's going on. You're sick kid, you don't have any money, the insurance don't want to pay, you're running on fumes, you got a husband over there that's not being supportive. I mean, I can just imagine the mindset. It doesn't take
Mm-hmm.
me hard to get into there. So
Yeah.
your work is phenomenal. I'm so encouraged by the people that are listening right now that know somebody that can get your help or, offer hope and encouragement. And that's
Yeah.
basically what we're trying to do with this. But you just mentioned just now about fate. And what are some strategies? You talk about the strategies for the marriage. What are some
Yeah.
strategies that people can do to deepen their faith and overcome life's toughest challenges? And it doesn't have to be your kid is sick. Hopefully,
Right.
that doesn't
Right.
happen a lot. But you mean you could be without a job, you could be in foreclosure, you can be sick yourself, you can be divorced. There's all kinds of, life doesn't have any, life has an endless supply of challenges. So
Yeah. Oh,
people
yeah.
have faith for. So
Yeah.
what are some strategies to deepen your faith other than the obvious one, pray?
Yeah. The obvious one is that, sure. When things hit people like that hard, first of all, the first place they would probably want to go to is cultivate a strong support system. That usually surrounds themselves around family, right? When something goes wrong, friends, mentors, wherever you find that, who can offer you encouragement, guidance, prayer during difficult times. That's cultivate that support network. Try not to isolate yourself. being alone, in communities. And I know there's very hard hit communities. And I'm a big advocate of community. I'm a community-based organization. If our country could do a better job in building strong communities that can help one another, our world, our nation, I think would be in a much better place because there's a lot of people out there, they don't have support network. There's no one. We need strong
Certainly not
community.
in communities. Maybe they're families and friends, not communities. Right. No.
Yeah. And
Mhm.
then, the other practice again, I usually do if some people aren't raised with faith, they don't know anything about it, but I encourage you. I think for myself personally, I can't imagine people try to be God of their own lives and take control of their own lives, but that can only go so far
Yeah.
until it breaks them and they go off the deep end, and who knows where that's going to take them, right? So the faith is what keeps you anchored to draw closer to God in the hardest of times, even when you don't understand what's going on. You need to pray. For some people, they meditate. Meditation is something else other people like to do. For me, I get into the scripture reading. The word is alive and well, and just speak to me, Lord. What is you trying to tell? What is going on here? Guide my day. What's happening here? Um, even pastors or counselors in the churches can help. They have a lot of different services too that they under a church umbrella that can help people. Again, the third thing I tell people is practicing that surrendering. We always want to control it, acknowledge that there are aspects in life that are beyond our control. And in my case, this was beyond our control. I couldn't fix it. And I had to learn to surrender it to a higher power. So
Mhm.
practicing that. For me, I was always looking for the meaning in the suffering, just because that's the way I'm wired. What's
Mhm.
the meaning behind this? Why did this all happen? What's
Mhm.
the purpose? And I'm one of those type of people. It just came and through me. And that's meaning and purpose are, like I said, struggles in our lives brings about what it did for us. Huge growth, personal growth we had to learn.
Mhm.
It strengthened our character beyond measure,
Mhm.
and it
In
deepened
your marriage,
our
because as a
marriage. Yeah,
right.
empathy. Yeah, empathy toward others.
Yeah. Yeah.
uh, it's amazing how struggles can really get you out of yourself. It humbles you, believe me, beyond, but
Yeah.
brought me to a transformational point. Does that make
Yeah.
sense? And it'll transform you. And all I got to say is it did. The shift happened. It transformed my husband and I. Nothing meant anything in the world. Doesn't matter. We could lose our home. I don't care. We don't. I'm not going to do anything else in the world unless it has eternal significance. Because what I mentioned to my husband, the enemy messed with the wrong mama and papa bear, at least the mama bear. And I tell him that, and I write that in my book because I'm going to
Yes.
bring more people to know Christ than he
Yes.
messed with the wrong mama,
Yes. Yes.
the wrong
Yes.
mama bear. And I got angry, and that was that anger part, and how just whether he was part of it or not, but there was a higher calling, I believe, on our lives. There was a very prophetic woman that wrote a letter to us and said, Mitchell was the catalyst. There was a higher calling on you too. And
Mhm.
she wrote about it, and I was just like, whoa, it took me back a few steps reading that. And, but anyway, that's a subject for something else. But practice self compassion for yourself. I can be hard on myself. Some people are hard, at least I am. And I had to learn to be compassionate to myself during struggling times and treat myself with the same kind of kindness and understanding that I would a loved one. And
Mhm.
sometimes we have a tendency to beat ourselves up too much.
Mhm.
And I had to learn that. Uh, what else? We're on faith, deepening faith. Stay connected for sure.
Mhm.
Practice patience and perseverance in your walk. And the last thing I would say, I had to learn along the way, celebrate the victories, big and small, along the way,
Yeah.
and celebrate them. Yeah. Each step forward, each moment of resilience you go through, each triumph that you overcome, you'll look back in your life and go, wow, how did I get through that? It makes
Yeah.
you stronger, your character
Yeah.
stronger, and you're
Yeah.
persevering through trials. There was a there was a scripture that was our mantra when we were walking through our walk, that I happened to be sitting in a service when our pastor was speaking, and he brought up this, and it just resonated with, when things resonate that you feel like they're speaking directly to you, right? This message was for me. And he said,
Mhm.
Joshua 1:9, and he says, God was commanding Joshua at the time, have I not commanded you to be strong and courageous? Do not be discouraged or dismayed, for the Lord thy God is with you wherever you go. And that became whoa, I can't, that was our mantra. We have it inscribed in all our
Mhm.
5K t-shirts now, on all our hats, and giving people that strength and courage Bible verse when you're going through the worst and I can't move, put one foot in front of the other. God commands us, be strong and courageous.
Right.
Do not be
And that
terrified or
was that
discouraged.
was my scripture too.
Huh?
I didn't go through any sickness, but there's a time when I was going through, this situation where um I was going through the situation with immigration. And I took my courage from the Bible as well. And yes, be strong and courageous was my mantra.
Oh, isn't that something? See, now we're going to share it, Myrna, with everyone else because it really helped us. And then when I was sharing that scripture with others, and even my own mother, who didn't understand it, and I had explained to her Joshua 9 and be strong and courageous. Oh, she loved that. It's
Yes,
giving it that to that people who need that little bit of encouragement. And it's an easy Bible verse to remember. Be strong
yes,
and courageous. Be
courageous,
strong
right.
and
Yes, yes, that was
do
mine.
not be terrified or
Yes,
discouraged, for the Lord
yes.
thy God is with you wherever you go. And he
Mhm.
is there, right there. And that's the thing that people need to realize. He's closer to us because he lives in us and he's right
Right,
there. We
right.
need to call upon him
Mhm.
and he will answer and
Oh,
he will
yes, of
speak to
course.
all of us, which is beautiful. In the book that I wrote, I had to document all the spiritual signs that God sent to us so we could
Mhm.
heal. And he does that specifically for his people who believe in him, so we can heal. And certain messages and signs and wonders, it might, other people might ignore it because they don't get it, but
Right.
it was meant for you. And so I had to take photographs and document it so it's inside the book. And
Oh, it's
so it
beautiful.
goes along with each chapter. So it's just it's oh, yeah, I don't even know how to say it except if I didn't document it, no one would believe me.
I said, this is such a pleasant conversation because I know that you loved your son and I know that you suffered, but you are a new person, just like your book says. You are a new person. I can see the joy and the passion and the happiness that's emanating from you. So anybody that's watching on TV or on YouTube can see it too. That's amazing. All right. So tell us about your book, A New Creation, Finding Meaning in the Midst of a Tragedy. Why did you write it, and what do you want the readers to walk away with after reading?
I wrote it because it took 10 years, well, 12 years. Finally got published in 2022, but it took me that long to write it because I couldn't see the fingerprints of God through it all until then. If I wrote it any earlier, I wouldn't have seen truly kind of the fuller picture.
Mhm.
So it took that long for me to write it. It took me 15 months to write it, put it together. That was during COVID. Got published by a New York publisher in 2022 on a first book submission, so that's unheard of. So that they loved the story.
Yeah,
So it got published in 2022. You can find it wherever books are sold right now on Amazon or wherever you buy books. And everyone sells books now.
right,
So
right, right.
whether
Mhm.
you go to the, brick and mortar, Barnes and Noble, wherever you can find it there. And so what was the question again? I lost
What do you
track.
want?
I'm
That's
working
okay.
to
What do you
find it.
want
Yes.
readers to walk away with after
Oh,
reading?
yes.
Probably everything that we've been talking about here, but if you want to
Yes. Most
succinct.
people say when they read the book, they're all a lot of testaments in the book. People they're blown away. They're kind of like, wow. That's
Right.
the first reaction. It will take you on a roller coaster ride. It is a memoir of our story. My husband pitched for the Los Angeles Dodgers organization. So it started out how we met. and how the love of baseball came, because you'll see baseball on the front cover of the book.
Mhm.
That's my son right there, Mitchell. And so
Wow,
baseball was
that's a
rooted
good
through our
swing.
family. And so there is some baseball analogy and some fun stuff, and you'll get to see Mitchell and who Mitchell was. Is he a beautiful young man? And it'll take you on a roller coaster ride as the story goes on of what happened and the struggle we went through, and how we came out of it, and how Mitchell, there's a chapter called Speaking Beyond the Veil of Heaven, how Mitchell was communicating with us after he passed, and
Mm,
through those signs and wonders that were just so comforting to us. And just then from there on, that same thing, this is not the end, this is the beginning, where things took off from there in the story, how we helped different people, how different things came together. So it's one of those stories that right now, for your listeners, in 2023, tomorrow we are putting the final touches on the movie screenplay for this book. So we are now, yeah, I mean, that's the next thing
I
that's
can see
happening
that
with
on
this.
Lifetime.
Yeah,
Yes.
on this story. And so hopefully we'll see this story made in the next couple of years or so. It's not a fast process in that industry, but that's kind of a beautiful thing where my heart was. Book was one thing, but my heart wanted to take it to film. And so that's what we're doing. So that's
Yes.
that's next.
Yes. I've seen, stories not like yours, but along the same kind of genre on Lifetime. And it's beautiful when,
Yeah.
um, yeah, I mean, this is a story that needs to be told. It's a story that needs to be told. There is light beyond heartbreak. That would be you're saying that God never wastes a tragedy, but there's light beyond heartbreak because we're all going to go through certain heartbreaks in life. If you want to talk scripture, it says it's not when, not if, but when,
Mhm.
we have a tragedy. We are going to all experience it. At least most of us is going to be touched by it. And a lot of times, we want to go into a dark tunnel, but there's light. Go towards the light. So this is a beautiful story of a tragedy that turns into something bigger and greater and beautiful. And Mitchell's name will forever be lit up
Yeah.
because he opened that door, opened that gate to all the beautiful things that's happening right now. So,
Yeah.
Beth, I mean, wonderful work, wonderful story, excellent interview. I've learned so much from you. You've renewed my faith.
Uh, I
You
know
renewed
it's
my faith.
something.
Yes, and
Yeah. And then
encouraged
so
me in my walk, right? Mhm.
yeah, and your audience needs to know that it is an everyday exercise, like taking care of your body. You need to open up and exercise your spiritual muscle, and just like your physical body. We're right. We all know we're mind, body, spirit. We need to work at both. We need to work it all and make it come together to be strong and resilient to stand these hard times we all live in today.
Yes, 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 yes. So beautiful. Yes, I love this. I love our conversation, Beth. Well, listen, guys, thank you very much for tuning in to this week's episode of Transform Your Mind to Transform Your Life. Today, we were talking about transforming your mind after a heartbreaking tragedy. Any of us can just imagine the pain of losing a child, but we are transforming our mind that it's not the end, it is the beginning. How many people would actually say that? So Beth can,
Mhm.
and she's sharing her story with us. Pick up a copy of her book, be inspired, be encouraged, strengthen your connection to God. If you don't have one, then this is an opportunity for you to get one because you will need him you know, because we're all, like I said, we're all gonna have the day when, we're gonna pray to God, right? And it's good to have a relationship with him at the time when you do. So thank you guys for tuning in. I will have a summary of my conversation with Beth. I will have a link to her book. Beth, what is your website? And what are your social media handles so that people will know how to go and maybe fill in their application for help?
Absolutely. The website is mitchellthorpe.org. So that's MITCHELLTHORP as in Paul, .org, O-R-G. That'll take you to the Mitchell Thorp Foundation website. You will see at the top bar where you can click on assistance, and there you scroll down and there's a downloadable application that you would send into the foundation. As far as Facebook, it's Mitchell Thorpe, and same thing with Instagram. So you can find us on that Mitchell Thorpe Foundation on both of those. And yeah.
Okay, well, that's easy. We're using the name. Yes, have it in lights, Mitchell Thorpe.
Yeah,
Right.
you'll find it. It will pop up when you Google it.
Yeah, he is the reason for the season, as you want to say it. Yes. Okay. Awesome. So I will link out to the website, the book, and the social media handles so that you can continue to follow, learn, apply, get some, scripture that will help you strengthen yourself on the times that you're feeling weak. So I'm pretty sure that Beth and her foundation does all that. So thanks again for being on the show, Beth. It was really an honor to share your story and to share your light, because that's what you are now. You are a light, right? So,
The light in the dark, helping it, just
yeah.
doing my part, right? So doing my part and learning to live in that light to help others.
Yes, you are in the light. Yes, you've accessed the light. So thank you for sharing your light with us and for encouraging us. So as we wrap up, any last words?
Yes, go out and buy the book. Give me a good review. That's the key. If you get the book, we put the review on Amazon. It helps push the book up further, and and look for the story. Hopefully, in the coming years, up 2 years or so, and we'll get this story out in film. And yeah, follow us. I'm anewcreation.org or mitchellthorpe.org. You can find me both places.
Okay, great. Well, thank you guys. Thank you, Beth. Um, uh, as I said, if you, Beth talked about getting a review for her book. I will definitely do the same thing. Because yes, reviews help push the show, push the book to a better audience. So if you're watching this on iTunes, would love for you to also share a review for the show. If you're listening to watching this on YouTube, would love for you to not only subscribe, but also maybe leave a comment. Talk about, your experience with what we're talking about now. And if you've had any, stories of your own that you want to share where God has, taken you through and taking you through your hardships. And if not, then, let us know how we can help. So thanks again, Beth. Thanks again for tuning in. And until next time, namaste.
Thank you.
You're welcome.